Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's March 26th, and we have a lot to talk about. Two things are kind of happening around us this week. MS Awareness Month is coming to an end, and this Thursday is the second annual Progressive MS Day. I think that MS Awareness Month took on some added importance this year when the National MS Society kicked it off by announcing the results of the several years-long MS prevalence study, which showed that instead of 400,000 people living with MS in the United States, that had been the quote-unquote official prevalence number for literally decades, the new study results showed that there are actually almost 1 million people over the age of 18 living with MS in the U.S. We unpacked the details of the MS prevalence study just a couple of weeks ago, and if you happen to miss that episode of Real Talk MS, you might want to check out episode 81. And if your goal is raising awareness of MS during MS Awareness Month, I think there probably isn't much more that you can say beyond the fact that nearly 1 million families are affected by MS here in the United States, and the challenge of finding better treatments and identifying a cure is twice as urgent as we thought it was. So I think this MS Awareness Month will be one that stands out in my memory for a while. And as March winds down, we can turn our attention to this Thursday because March 28th is Progressive MS Day. While only about 15% of the people diagnosed with MS are initially given a diagnosis of primary progressive MS, about 65% of the people who are diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS will eventually develop secondary progressive MS. And the difference between progressive MS and relapsing remitting MS is that usually people diagnosed with progressive MS don't experience any remission in their disease progression. Their MS just seems to worsen more steadily over time. And I've had a front row seat to what that can be like. In 1997, my wife Jean was diagnosed with secondary progressive MS, and within just a few short years, I saw Jean go from being an avid cyclist who got up at 4 o'clock every morning to ride her bike 40 miles every day to being a bedbound quadriplegic. Jean's MS has progressed to the point that today she can no longer be cared for at home, nor can she be cared for at a standard skilled nursing facility. She receives all of her nutrition by means of a feeding tube. She's been nonverbal for the past few years. She's experienced cognitive decline. She even requires assistance breathing. So today, Jean is cared for in a subacute nursing facility where I visit her every day. And I'll just add that she's the toughest person I know. Now, most people living with MS won't ever get dealt the hand that Jean's been dealt. But that's a snapshot of what progressive MS can be. And while we have more than a dozen approved disease-modifying therapies for relapsing remitting MS, we have one approved disease-modifying therapy for progressive MS. So using Progressive MS Day to highlight the need for more research, more treatments, and more attention to be paid to this less popular but more devastating MS subtype is important. My guest on the podcast is Kevin Reid, who was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS in 2002 and is now living with progressive MS. We'll get Kevin's thoughts about Progressive MS Day and hear about his very successful efforts as an MS warrior. But before we get to my conversation with Kevin Reid, there are a few other things that you should know about. During the month of March, the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America recognized MS Awareness Month by calling attention to the impact of MS on families. They put together some great online content on how MS affects relationships and on MS care partner needs. And even though MS Awareness Month may be ending, this excellent content lives on. So I wanted to give you a heads up about a few worthwhile programs. When it comes to MS and relationships, the MSAA produced a podcast titled Exploring Relationships and MS with psychologist and MS specialist Miriam Franco. You'll also find a webinar titled Intimacy and Family Planning with MS, and the webinar features Kimberly Costello, a licensed marriage and family therapist who's also living with MS. And as an MS care partner, I found the webinar titled The Partnership of Care, Redefining Caregiver to Care Partner to be really worthwhile. The webinar features Megan Wagle, an MS nurse practitioner. And finally, there's a podcast titled Spotlighting Care Partner Needs with licensed clinical social worker, therapist, and wellness educator, Lara Krawchuk. Again, you'll find all of this new content on the MSAA website, and I'll include links to each of these webinars and podcasts in today's show notes. If I were to say to you that MS treatment guidelines weren't being followed, you might assume that these guidelines weren't being followed by patients. So what if I told you that it might be the neurologists who are choosing not to follow MS treatment guidelines? Back in 2002, the American Academy of Neurology published a set of evidence-based MS treatment guidelines for neurologists who are treating patients who were diagnosed with MS. In other words, these guidelines were created by analyzing the results of MS research. One of these guidelines recommends that disease-modifying therapy should be discontinued in individuals over the age of 54 who no longer have MS relapses and who haven't been ambulatory for at least 2 years. So these would be severely disabled older individuals living with progressive MS. And the underlying reason for this guideline is that there is no research that demonstrates that individuals in these specific circumstances, over the age of 54, more severely disabled, living with progressive MS, well, there's no research that shows that these individuals have ever benefited from disease-modifying therapy. Well, new research presented just a few weeks ago at the ACTRIMS Forum in Dallas, Texas, showed that many neurologists are apparently overlooking this treatment guideline. The study analyzed data from a large longitudinal MS study using more than 2,300 participants, and they compared disease-modifying therapy use in the years 2000 and 2009. And the research team found that contrary to the published guidelines, disease-modifying therapy use was significant among older people, age 54 and older, who were living with primary progressive MS and secondary progressive MS. The research team concluded that there may be good reason for individual patients to deviate from the AAN's published treatment guidelines, but in many cases, the ongoing use of disease-modifying therapy for patients over the age of 54 living with progressive MS and more severe disability posed the ongoing risk of adverse side effects and high costs without likelihood of any benefit. Well, as science and medicine are extending everyone's life expectancy, including people living with MS, even progressive MS, there may be more and more people falling into this category. And for these individuals and their families, the evidence that they aren't going to be helped by any of the approved disease-modifying drug treatments is hard medicine to swallow. And it's one more reason why we need more research focused on progressive MS in general and progressive MS among an aging population specifically. And if you'd like to review the details of this study, I'll include a link in today's show notes. Having just said that we need more research focused on progressive MS, I should also mention that the National MS Society has just committed $1 million to help support a phase 2 clinical trial of stem cells in progressive MS. The trial is being led by Dr. Saud Sadiq at the Tisch MS Research Center of New York, and the trial will involve 50 people living with progressive MS. The stem cells will be derived from the participants' own bone marrow stem cells, and these cells will then be expanded in the laboratory and developed into specific cells called mesenchymal neural progenitors, and then infused back into the spinal fluid in multiple doses. Now, these stem cells, these mesenchymal neural progenitors, are thought to release growth factors that may promote tissue repair in the central nervous system, as well as immune messengers that may inhibit immune responses. This trial is going to test whether, after receiving the stem cell treatment, the participants show improvement in their measure of disability. Now, stem cells continue to be a hot topic among people living with MS, and my email inbox tells me that there continues to be a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. So I'll do my best to warn you about the stem cell frauds and the stem cell scams, and update you on the promising stem cell science that's taking place today. As we approach Progressive MS Day, I want to tell you about an upcoming global webcast that's being hosted by the MS International Federation. It's titled Solving Progressive MS, Progress Achieved, and Hope for the Future. The webcast is going to be hosted by Stuart Nixon, who was diagnosed with MS at the age of 18. And today, Stuart is the co-chair of the Scientific Research Strategy Committee of the UK MS Society, and Stuart has become a global MS advocate. Queen Elizabeth has recognized his efforts in raising awareness about MS by designating Stuart a member of the British Empire. And regular RealTalk MS listeners might remember that Stuart joined me on the podcast last year, and I can't think of a better person to be hosting this webcast. Stuart will be joined by some of the leading MS experts in the world, including Professor Alan Thompson, Chair of the Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee and Dean of the Faculty of Brain Sciences at University College London, Professor Giancarlo Comey, co-chair of the Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee, chair of the Department of Clinical Neurophysiology, and the director of the Institute of Experimental Neurology at the Scientific Institute San Raffaele, Milan, Italy. And Jennifer Freeman, professor of physiotherapy and rehabilitation at University of Plymouth, England. This remarkable panel of experts will be discussing the state of progressive MS research today, the work of the Progressive MS Alliance, and what must be done next to develop breakthrough treatments in progressive MS. This is going to be an important webcast for anyone who has any sort of interest in progressive MS, and frankly, I would consider that to be the entire MS community. The webcast takes place on April 10th, and it's free. I'll include a link for you to register for this global webcast in today's show notes, and when you register, you'll even have an opportunity to submit a question to this remarkable panel. I know that I won't be missing this particular webcast. We've been talking about progressive MS, which is an especially timely topic as we're just 2 days away from Progressive MS Day, which happens this year on March 28th. In a moment, we'll hear from my guest, Kevin Reid. Like the majority of people living with MS, in 2002, Kevin was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS. And today, Kevin is living with progressive MS. In a moment, we'll hear what Progressive MS Day is all about and what it means to Kevin. My guest today is Kevin Reid. Kevin was diagnosed with MS in 2002, and today, Kevin and I are talking about a subject that a lot of regular RealTalk MS listeners will know is very important to me. We're talking about progressive MS. Welcome to the podcast, Kevin.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
I'm glad you could join us today. Well, this Thursday, March 28th, is the second annual Progressive MS Day. And I know it's being celebrated by several MS advocacy groups, MS centers, and state governments across the country. So tell me, Kevin, what is Progressive MS Day all about, and what makes it important to you?
It's Progressive MS Day. It's a novel concept, and it's basically setting aside a day that we can, think about what progressive MS is, how it affects those of us who have it, and we can it's kind of an odd way to do it, but we're going to celebrate the people that are dealing with this issue, because it's not a very exciting situation to have to deal with MS, ups and downs that come along with that. But having the day set aside, we're hoping can help shine a spotlight on what's happening with people with progressive MS, because it's an urgent need to come up with some fixes for this. And having a day, I feel like it not only helps with finding a cure, but we're honoring the people that are dealing with this.
I know that you were diagnosed with MS back in 2002. I'm curious, was your initial diagnosis progressive MS?
It was not. No, originally it was Remitting. I went, blind in my right eye. So I went to the eye doctor, and they said, hey, this pattern of test results looks like usually this is the first sign of MS. You should see a neurologist. So I did, and the rest is history. The MRIs were conclusive, and I've been dealing with it ever since. Lots of ups and downs, and it's a process. It's a whole journey of day-to-day existence, because it is different, can be different from day to day. So yeah, it's been a while that I've been dealing with it. Lots of different symptoms. I don't need to go through them all, because I think your listeners know them all. What happens with the lightning strikes of your nervous system, and then you get the weakness and the fatigue and all the things that are no fun. But we try to maintain a positive outlook even as we're dealing with all of these difficult things.
When you were initially diagnosed with relapsing remitting, I'm assuming then that you experienced some periods of remission. Did you notice a time when things began to change and the disease actually started progressing?
It's kind of a hard thing to put a finger on, because it's happening, and it's kind of like the frog in the pot of boiling water, and it's slowly happening, and you don't realize what's going on, and then eventually, by the way, it's you've had enough time has gone by, and it's gotten worse, and so yeah, I definitely noticed it over time, especially when my the nerve that controls my left side went completely haywire, and my whole left side went numb years ago. And again, multiple symptoms, different things, but that was a big one, and it's never really not really slowed down, but actually there has been moments of success with as time goes by for various treatments and whatnot. So it was a process. It was a long process, really.
So over the past decade, there's been certainly an increased focus on progressive MS research. What are your thoughts about all of that, about where we are today compared to where we were back when you were diagnosed?
It's an amazing thing, because there are so many different strategies to address MS. Medication is definitely one of them, one of the most crucial ones. I'm really excited about the attention that's been paid to trying to figure out, obviously people are looking for a cure, but they're also looking for ways to control it from getting worse, right? And so there are it's exciting, the new medications that are out there, and ways of dealing with it. I am very encouraged by the amount of attention that is being paid for it. I've heard somebody say, that MS is actually the disease to get, because there's so much attention being paid to it, which, I don't know how to think about that, but it is, as far as the medications and the research that's being, I think, really poured into it, especially with this new number of the fact that, hey, it's a million of us that are dealing with this. It's no longer that old number. That's a big part of what I'm thinking about and seeing also, as far as the, I don't want to say excitement, but feeling like, this is it's a real big deal, and we've just recently kind of found out that it's even bigger than we were thinking. So positive thoughts about it, and looking forward to in the next handful of years when they actually do find a cure for it, because that's the urgency that we're really dealing with right now.
Well, you talked about the timing of research, the progress being made. As we're talking about this, as we're kind of talking about Progressive MS Day, for several people, today will be the day that they're diagnosed with progressive MS. What advice or maybe words of wisdom would you share with those people?
Well, it's a scary thought, and it's a scary concept when the neurologist says, yeah, you do have MS. And so, people have asked me that before, and I think one of the most important things is your attitude towards it. Because, if you have even if it's a severe form of, secondary progressive, or if it goes really quickly, even if that's happening, I feel like the advice I would give is know that your mind is supporting you throughout your journey of symptoms, of pain, of things that are new. But for a newly diagnosed person, I would say keep hope, especially if you're diagnosed before anything has shown up with as far as severe symptoms. There are, like we said, great medications, lots of good things being poured into trying to figure it out. And there's lots of support, there's lots of community support. And that's one thing I love about the Progressive MS Day is that, this year the theme of it is embracing the community, or embracing your community. And that community is those of us that are dealing with MS. And so if you're newly diagnosed, especially on Progressive MS Day, you can, remember to come together with your loved ones, and there's patient advocacy groups out there that are all looking to support you if you're, as a newly diagnosed person. There's lots of resources out there, but most importantly, I think, is just embracing this community that does exist. There's lots of people out there that are working on our behalf and with us to try to figure it out and help improve our daily life as well. Not just look for the cure and research and all that's very important, but how do we support people in their daily life that are dealing with MS?
I think that's some great advice, actually. I have to tell you, one of the things that I particularly love about getting to do this podcast is I have the opportunity to discover new MS warriors. And these are people who aren't only living with MS, but these are people who are taking action and finding ways to participate in the effort to kind of solve MS. So, of course, I was so happy to discover that you have a project called Crush MS. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. Yeah. A few years ago, gosh, I don't even remember when it was, I think 6 or 7 years ago now, I was, thinking, what can I do to help this situation? Not just for me, but for the, at the time, 400,000 people, but now I know it's more like 1 million. How can I help? How can just my measly old me, what can I do to help? And, realized, I have a family winery, and we're here in Napa Valley. And I thought, maybe, somehow the wine world could come together and we could raise awareness and raise funds, kind of utilizing what we already have. And I met a woman named Julie, who is an amazing woman, and she has MS as well, and she also has a little family winery. And so we got to talking and said, we could get together and do a wine tasting, something as simple as having a party where we charge tickets and have an auction and raise some money, and we can donate those funds to programs that are doing research, that are helping find new fellows, because there's, as far as doctors working on MS, there's a shortage of specific MS specialists. And so one of the things we're doing is helping fund the development of new specialists at Stanford University, as well as we donate our funds that we raise from our big wine tasting party to programs that help people live well with MS. So there are programs, day programs that we donate to. There's programs that help with service animals, and so we basically take our funds that we decided to raise from having a wine tasting party and support. The ultimate goal is to eliminate MS, and in the meantime, supporting people to help them live their best life that are dealing with MS. So yeah, Crush MS is a really big project, we've created its actual nonprofit group now, and we have, over the last few years, we've had 30 wineries come, and it's a big, like I said, it's a party. Like, we want to have a good time, and we invite folks that have MS to come to it as well with the discount. If you have MS, you're invited. There's not a lot, a lot of times things can be, you feel isolated or alone with progressive MS. And so we wanted to do something where, in addition to raising the funds and having the fun party, we wanted to be open and inviting to folks that actually are dealing with MS itself. And so that's my, pet. It's not even a pet project. It's what I do. And we're doing that. It's happening again this year. And if I could plug it real quick, it's July 27th, 2019 at crushms.org. You can see all the details on that website. But, the ultimate goal is to eliminate MS. It's urgent. And when we came together years ago to create it, we thought, well, how can we help with what we have? And that's what we decided to do. And it's been a lot of fun, actually, to have the gatherings. And, because we do want to have a party. And we call it the summer celebration, because we come together and celebrate the fact that we're working on this difficult disease and this difficult situation. But, again, we want to have our mindset be, well, we're going to get together and enjoy our time together and celebrate this cause. So I know that's kind of where that's at, and we're really excited about that one. With I'm gonna pivot back to the Progressive MS Day, because when we got together with groups, Genentech and other advocacy groups got together and said, well, we want to have this day. They reached out to me because I had been doing this work for a little while, and it's kind of a good fit. We all benefit from Progressive MS Day. We all, when I speak of the MS community, we all benefit from Crush MS and what we're doing here, and with the ultimate goal of supporting those of us with progressive MS and finding a cause and a cure for this as soon as possible.
Kevin, thank you for kicking off Progressive MS Day with us and sharing your story. And thank you for all that you're doing through Crush MS to crush MS.
It's an honor. It's an honor to be on your show. I love this podcast. It's fantastic. And, I really, really appreciate your kind words and support of what we're doing in an effort to bring more awareness and the cure for progressive MS. So thank you very much.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Just a reminder that your feedback, your questions, and suggestions for future podcast episodes are important to me. That's why, in addition to emailing me at john@realtalkms.com, that's JON@realtalkms.com, you can also call the special listener hotline that I set up specifically to capture your comments and suggestions. Just call area code 310-526-2283 in the United States and share your thoughts. So whether you choose to shoot me an email or make a phone call, I hope you'll get in touch and join our conversation. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.